Get ready for the Great North Wrestling Podcast, the official podcast of the Hannibal TV, Canada's #1 pro wrestling YouTube channel, with your host, GNW wrestler and the Hannibal TV lead reporter, Devin Hannibal Nicholson.
This is Hannibal from thehannibaltv.com, checking in with everybody here for another Great North Wrestling Podcast. And on the line, I have Great North Wrestling reporter, Great North Wrestling announcer / the Hannibal TV announcer / CK DJ announcer / hockey announcer, Zach McGibbon. How are you today?
I'm doing good. I didn't realize how many things I do until you pointed it out to me, how many different roles I have. But no, I'm happy to be on and super excited to be on the podcast.
And the only thing that's not so great about today here in Ottawa, Canada, is this snow, this never-ending snow. But I had a little break from it a couple weeks ago when I was in Philadelphia recording 6 shoot interviews. It was supposed to be 7, but Bill DeMott unfortunately backed out of his shoot interview, but we did record his seminar. Have you seen any of the clips I've posted so far?
I've seen the one with Shane Douglas. I've seen a couple of them. I saw the one about the XFL announcement, and I saw you also posted some stuff from Missy Hyatt's shoot interview, so I took a little bit of interest there. The one I'm really excited for, and I've seen these ones too, is the Teddy Hart stuff. I think a lot of people are interested to see just the character and the enigma that is Teddy Hart. And I was actually, probably one of my favorite videos from them so far is actually you touring Teddy's house. It literally looked like he was underwater. He was living in an underwater home. It was crazy. But that's currently one of my favorite videos right now, is just taking a look at where Teddy Hart lives and just like the inside of his house and just all the crazy things and all the awesome memorabilia he has inside his home.
Unfortunately, we ended up recording that at about 4:30 in the morning, and his acquaintance at the time or whatever, the stripper that he lives with, was in his bedroom sleeping. But the bedroom actually has a giant candle in it, which is pretty interesting. It's a very high ceiling bedroom, and there's probably a 12-foot high candle in the bedroom, about 3 feet in circumference, as well as a whole video monitoring system. That entire house, each room in the house is under surveillance. So I spent a couple days with him. We actually went out with 5-time WWE Divas champion Melina the night before we recorded that shoot interview. And I did record that interview, and that's going to be up very soon on the Hannibal TV. And people that want to see the full shoot interviews faster, they could join our Patreon site, which is patreon.com/thehannibaltv. We post the shoot interviews up there very quickly. The Missy Hyatt full shoot's already up there. The Shane Douglas shoot is up there. It's only $1.99 a month. And if you join that, you're helping us conduct more shoot interviews. We did one with Barry Windham while we were out there in Philadelphia. Also the Blue Meanie, which was pretty hilarious. He's a comical character. But we want to do more of these trips. We're going to be attending the Cauliflower Alley Club annual awards ceremony. I think it's in late April and early May, and it was just announced Shawn Michaels will be receiving an award at that ceremony. So that makes me even more excited about covering that. And we're going to try and get some UFC fighter interviews while we're down there too. And speaking of UFC fighting, the next big Great North Wrestling event is Cage Wars 2. And all the matches, of course, are going to be inside of an MMA cage. Now, before we get on to the card for that one, we all know the greatest wrestler in Canadian history, myself, will be taking on Haku, who everyone claims is the toughest wrestler ever to live, but we'll see. I've been training with Alain Moussi from the Kickboxer series. He's been helping me prepare for this match. You're going to see me in better shape than ever. But before we get on to some of the card for Cage Wars 2, what are your thoughts on Cage Wars 1?
I remember Cage Wars 1, just a totally different environment, and I think the wrestlers as well really didn't know what they were expecting, and it ended up being with some awesome matches because all the wrestlers had to change their game plan. You had to see a lot more grappling. You had to see a lot more takedowns. It was just awesome being a part of that first Cage Wars event and just seeing the different matches. And you could tell it was punishing. So it is going to be excited to see this next event, Cage Wars 2. And the way this card is shaping up, man, this may be even better than Cage Wars 1.
I think so, and I think this time we're going to even see a stronger style of wrestling, more UFC style of wrestling, even more MMA style. Of course, me beating the hell out of Haku, everyone's going to come to see that. Haku hasn't been in this area of Canada since his WWE days. And also Laurel Van Ness, who according to television is still the Impact Wrestling women's champion, is taking on Lady Yasmin. What are your thoughts on those two matches, Zach?
Well, on the women's match there, I'm super excited for that one. Laurel Van Ness, a trainee of Lance Storm. She has incredible wrestling ability, and she'll have to use her that wrestling ability into the cage and try and change things up, as we'll see that presence there going into the matchup. And Lady Yasmin, man, she's been on a tear ever since she won the women's championship. So this is going to be really two forces colliding within each other to try and go after that championship. So I'm super excited for that matchup. As far as your match with Haku, man, it's going to be a war is all I can really say. Like, it's going to be back and forth. It's going to be hard. It's going to be stiff. It's going to be brutal to watch, and it's going to be fun to watch at the same time. I'm super excited for this matchup. It's interesting to hear your confidence going into this match. A lot of people have been saying just how tough Haku is and how the stories go of him gouging people's eyeballs out. But you seem to be taking it in stride, getting prepared for this matchup.
Well, what people don't realize is this is not a street fight. This is MMA/professional wrestling rules. He cannot rip my eyes out. He'll be disqualified. He cannot bite my nose off. He'll be disqualified. So if we got down to MMA rules, which is what I'm currently training in to prepare for this, I think he's going to have a difficult time. I'm not taking anything away from him. But I got robbed when I lost the Great North Wrestling Canadian title to Quebecer Pierre at the last Great North Wrestling event. I was preparing for somebody else. Unfortunately, due to the disaster in Puerto Rico, all flights were canceled to Ottawa from Puerto Rico, so Savio Vega could not fight me. So I got a surprise. Quebecer Pierre got in there and basically stole the title away from me. But I got the last laugh because I actually gave him severe concussion out of that match, as well as several lacerations to the face. And while I went out, had a nice meal, actually did a workout later that night, he spent the night in the hospital. So I consider myself the overall winner of that match.
I saw the match, and boy, I will say you did leave a hell of a beating, but at the end of the day, Quebecer Pierre is the champion of Great North Wrestling, and the fact that he's going to come after that and go into a matchup inside of an MMA cage, the first time since that matchup, it's going to really show the toughness of Quebecer Pierre. So I'm looking forward to see how he steps up and defends his championship like the fighting champion that I know that he can be.
And it hasn't been announced yet who Quebecer Pierre is going to be wrestling at Cage Wars. Of course, Jeremy Prophet made a video recently saying he should be the number one contender to either Quebecer Pierre's Great North Wrestling Canadian Championship or Wes Briscoe, who is the first ever Great North Wrestling World Television Champion. He'll also be there May 12th in Brockville at Cage Wars, but neither of the championship matches for the males have been announced yet, so I guess we're going to have to wait for the president or the commissioner to announce those. But it's going to be a big card. Maximum Testosterone's already been announced to face Ad Hutchinson from the UK, who's appeared on Impact clips in recent months, and they recently had a draw, so that should be interesting. I think Ad will have the advantage in the MMA cage. But, of course, at the first Cage Wars, now that I remember, Max Testosterone was in a best 2 out of 3 falls match against Davey Boy Smith Jr., and Max Testosterone actually did get one fall over Smith, which surprised me, to be honest. Davey Boy Smith Jr. was victorious. What are your thoughts on the match that Max Testosterone had with Davey Boy Smith Jr. and how he'll fare against Ad Hutchinson in the cage May 12th in Brockville?
Well, as you mentioned, I was surprised on how well Max did. Big power guy, obviously Canada's strongest wrestler. He actually fared very well. Obviously, Davey Boy with an MMA background, obviously learning under the Heart Dungeon, has got that family lineage. But boy, Max looked really good in that cage, and I'm interested to see how this upcoming matchup with Ad happens. Of course, the British Brawler. And it's interesting. This will be a good chance as well. The British wrestling scene has just been on fire recently with some of the talent that's coming in, and you're going to get to see one of those talents there, Ad Hutchinson, in cage against Maximum Testosterone. That brawling type will really help him out in the cage, and I think he'll use that cage to his advantage, but you can never underestimate the power game that Maximum Testosterone brings. And we saw that against Davey Boy Smith Jr. as well. As you mentioned, he got a fall in that matchup. And that's definitely something to be commended for, especially against a guy who has that background in Davey Boy Smith Jr. So this is definitely a matchup that is really enticing to watch. Two different styles meshing in the same cage. It's going to be a fun match to watch.
And I did hear through the grapevine that Davey Boy Smith Jr. has actually been invited to participate in Cage Wars 2, but apparently he's waiting for his New Japan schedule because, of course, he's under contract with New Japan and he does not have his May booking schedule yet. So it'll be interesting if he is cleared by New Japan to fight in Cage Wars 2, who his opponent will be, because I think that would be a great addition to the card.
No, absolutely, and obviously, if New Japan allowed him the first time, I'm sure they'll allow him for this second time to compete in the match there. So I'm super excited. Hopefully we get to see Davey Boy inside of that cage and face another opponent there. Maybe, you never know, maybe he'll go after Quebec Pierre for the title. Maybe he'll go after Wes Briscoe. You never know. Obviously, he stated his intentions at the end of his match against Maximum Testosterone that he wants to go for the main title, the GNW Canadian Heavyweight Championship. So it's something to keep an eye on, and hopefully New Japan allows it. So it's something to keep an eye on, and I'm super excited for it.
And for fans that want to get tickets for Cage Wars 2, they're on sale right now at ticketweb.ca. You can buy 4 for $40. That's ticketweb.ca. They'll also be available at the door. And there'll be other in-person ticket locations that we're going to know about in Brockville in the coming weeks. Brockville, it's right across the border from Watertown, New York. It's only about half an hour from Kingston, Ontario. It's only about 45 minutes to an hour from Ottawa. It's only about an hour from Cornwall, Ontario, so it's well worth the trip. This is going to be a massive event, Cage Wars 2, 2 girls matches on the card, and the card is just shaping up more and more as the weeks go by. We did have 2 serious injuries at the last Cage Wars, just to tell you how dangerous it is. First of all, a regular wrestling ring, there's no spring as people think, but it's loose plywood and an amateur wrestling mat, but there's absolutely no give at all to the Cage Wars floor. And then, of course, you have steel mesh instead of ropes, so that adds to the danger. But, of course, I got busted open really badly during the first Cage Wars, but an even worse injury that occurred was K9, who had been wrestling for us for several years and is a police officer in his everyday life. He actually suffered a career-ending injury at the first Cage Wars when he took a Muay Thai-style elbow by Preston Perry to the ear, and it actually broke his eardrum. He needed stitches inside of his eardrum, and the doctors have advised him he cannot take any more blows to the head directly to that area again in his life, or he could lose his hearing. So that was one of the unfortunate things about the first Cage Wars last year, which you can look up, Cage Wars on the Hannibal TV. It is posted, the full event video, on YouTube. And Cage Wars 2 is going to be very dangerous. I realize I'm taking on an extremely dangerous opponent, but 2018 is going to be one of the greatest years for Hannibal. I'm going to start the year off by beating the crap out of a wrestling legend. Everyone thinks he's going to beat me. Well, I'm being trained right now by the best, Alain Moussi, from the Kickboxer series. He was a special guest referee at Great North Wrestling's 10th anniversary show in Ottawa, and he's a close friend of mine, and he's helping me prepare for this match, and I couldn't think of anyone better than him to help me prepare for this match. And as I talk about 2018, as you are aware of this, Zach, Les Enragés de Ring is the French reality show that GNW participated in that was recorded in 2017. And I have been informed by the producers that it will be airing on Télé Zé, also known as Zé Télé, across Canada, starting about mid-May 2018. So that's going to be a huge boost for Great North Wrestling. I'm very excited about that. And Zach, is there anything big in the wrestling news right now you want to discuss?
Well, I mean, there's some interesting stuff in terms of the business side of wrestling. I don't know if you saw this recently, but the WWE released its fourth quarter earnings from 2017, and their revenues are at record high. A bunch of their departments are at record highs. They're taking a ton of cash. So things are looking positive on the business side of WWE right now. Now, obviously, that's not profit. But that's still something to keep an eye on, especially because WWE is going to be in television negotiations very soon. And with the acquisition of Ronda Rousey as part of their roster, that'll definitely help in terms of their negotiations to try and get themselves a better TV deal. I don't know what your thoughts are on Ronda Rousey joining WWE and if you think that's a good move or not.
Well, they need superstars right now. They have a lot of talent, but they don't have many mainstream stars. And I think I even read in the Wrestling Observer reported that they're going to have even more of a focus on the women's division now because Ronda Rousey is going to be the biggest mainstream star they have now. So they do have that potential. I mean, she did have some pretty devastating defeats in her last UFC fights, her last two fights. But so did Brock Lesnar. His last two fights before they brought him back were first round knockouts. And then again, he came back and then it was ultimately declared a draw because he was he failed the drug test. So technically his last match was a draw, but that didn't seem to make a difference to the WWE fans. The WWE made the fans forget about that, and he's looked at as a monster now. I will mention one thing I'd like to bring up, that apparently there was an incident in the Royal Rumble where Braun Strowman kneed Lesnar in the face, and he gave him two legitimate punches. Is it true that Braun Strowman actually publicly apologized about that?
From what I saw, I don't think he really apologized for it. I think he just said it was two guys that sometimes they get into the heat of the moment and then they just kind of go a little bit extra. And he mentioned that they were both big guys and they were both big power guys, and so sometimes it gets away from them. But I didn't see anything about an apology. I could be completely wrong, and maybe he said he apologized to Brock. But in terms of a public apology, I haven't heard anything like that. All I know is that he mentioned that segment or that stretch of the match and said it was just kind of two guys that like were really into the match, and sometimes they get the better of them, and Strowman gave him that knee, and then Brock gave him the two punches, which were probably the stiffest punches that were delivered in WWE in a while. So but no, I haven't heard anything about a public apology. I don't think that's been the case.
Very good. Again, there's lots of false reports out there, so I'm glad I got clarification on that, because Braun had nothing to lose if he would have retaliated for those two stiff punches that Brock gave him. I saw that. I mean, even everyone knows Brock's better trained than him, and it would have been separated. I mean, if it had been me, I would have tried to fight him out of that rather than just take the punches. Everyone's different, but I'm glad there was no public apology, because I definitely thought that Braun should have done something back rather than just take those two punches, because it makes him look weak to me.
Yeah. Well, I think in fairness to Braun, I think he was pretty dazed after those two punches. Like, he looked pretty dazed after the second punch especially. So maybe, it was a little too late and they just had to continue on the match to play to play fair for Braun. But at the end of the day, it's like you hit me hard, I'll hit you back harder, sort of deal, right? I mean, that's that's especially the way that Brock rolls sometimes. Is if you're going to hit me really hard, I'm going to hit you really hard back, and that really goes into the realism that Brock portrays on TV. So it's again, it's just playing devil's advocate for Braun.
Yeah, he's definitely, as we mentioned, they're superstars. So now they'll have Ronda Rousey, who's a legitimate superstar, Lesnar, Cena, who's scaling down. I don't think Roman Reigns has crossed into that mainstream superstardom yet.
No.
So they still need to build some new stars. But what do you think about all the changes with Impact Wrestling? And for any fans that have been wondering why we've been posting the weekly Impact Wrestling media calls, both on our The Hannibal TV YouTube channel, as well as the GreatNorthWrestling.podomatic.com podcast page, as well as our podcast page on iTunes. That's just because we developed kind of a good working relationship, releasing some of Impact's content back when they recorded some events in Ottawa, which is where Great North Wrestling is based, back in November. And we're just continuing on by joining those media calls, and that's it. We're just releasing their content. We're not for or against Impact Wrestling necessarily. So to answer the fans' questions, I've had some fans write comments to me, what's with the sucking up to TNA? Well, no, they're just providing us content, and we're posting it. It's not sucking up to them whatsoever.
Yeah. They're media conference calls. Like PW Insider will be on these calls. The Wrestling Observer will be on these calls. Some big outlets out in the States. I've heard the Orlando Centennial will be on these calls. So it's essentially like a media gathering and taking questions at a press conference. That's really much of the extent to it.
But I'll give everyone my opinion of Impact. With the new regime, I mean, if you really want something different, in my opinion, why would you bring back Austin Aries and make him the champion again? That's been done. I don't think that was a boom period of Impact back when he was the champion before. And I don't think it's going to result in another boom period because it's just more of the same. I don't know what you think about that.
I like the people that they put in place. I do like both Don Callis and Scott D'Amore. In terms of the roster, I mean, at the end of it all, they just need to try and get some eyeballs on the product, right? And anybody that can bring some drawing power, whether it be a guy like Austin Aries or somebody that would come in and just kind of bring some eyeballs to the product, I think they'll have to look at. And to me, I wouldn't have put the belt on Aries as well that quickly. But at the same time, at this point, Impact's trying to make some news and try and get some buzz going. And so that's really the reason why they did this title change. I'm a big fan of Eli Drake. I wish he held the belt for a little longer. But at the end of it all, they're trying to get as much eyeballs on the product as much as they can. And if they could bring some established talent in, like the thing is, I'm fine if they bring in established talent and have them work, as long as it helps elevate some of the talent that hasn't been as exposed to a broader audience and try and elevate them onto the same level. But if it's just these already familiar talent facing another already familiar talent, you're not really going to get anywhere and not going to get any longevity out of the roster. So to me, I agree with you. I'm not a fan of them putting the title on Aries so quickly and the way they did it. But at the same time, I understand why they did it, because at this point, they just need to get some eyeballs on the product.
Yes, and they want to show that it's a different regime, and we'll see how this regime plays out. I wish them nothing but the best. I hope they do well. And I had a lot of fun. The match that I had for them last year that aired on the Explosion event, and I understand from actually talking to the Anthem representative there that they were looking at doing their next Impact tapings are going to be in the Toronto area, and then possibly down the road, from what they told me in that conversation, Calgary. So we'll see how that plays out. Anthem's a Canadian company. Hopefully they'll bring in more Canadian talent, and we'll see. But I see what they're doing. They're cutting. They've cut James Storm. From what I understand, they cut Lashley. Those were big contracts. So they're trying to make the company more profitable by having talent that are cheaper, I guess, which is good, because if they're getting the same revenue from the TV companies and the various other revenue streams they have, why pay for more expensive talent if you're getting the same revenue from the companies? One of their worst mistakes ever was when they brought Hogan. Definitely, that killed.
Yeah, that didn't really help things for TNA.
No, that sucked them dry, actually. But no, we wish Impact all the best, and we're happy to be part of their media calls. But as I said, I'd like to see. First of all, they say that they're changing their name to Impact Wrestling to be something different. Well, the TV show's always been called Impact Wrestling. So how is that different? So I don't know.
I mean, I guess they just wanted to drop the TNA initials that were on there. But yeah, I mean, at the end of it all, we really do hope that Impact succeeds, because at the end of the day, it helps the wrestling business when there's a successful company, and it'll give opportunities for some of the talents, and especially some of the talents here in Canada. Obviously, we've seen you be on a taping for Impact Wrestling. It gives a bunch of other talents here, especially here in Canada, the chance to get some television exposure. So it's a good thing for the business if they're still around. So I'm hoping that they're able to do that. Ed Nordholm has stated that break even is the goal right now in order to get the company going, and that's why they're doing this extreme cost cutting, is try and get to that break even point and then start to work their way into profitability. But yeah, I wish the best of luck too. I hope they succeed and they're able to rebuild this thing.
And for people like, well, of course, Great North Wrestling and The Hannibal TV is literally growing by leaps and bounds every day. So no matter what, we're going to be building this company, and it's going to continue to grow as the years come. But I have received confirmation WWE is not going to give me another chance. So I would like eventually TNA would be a great schedule for someone like me, where I could work there and do my own thing with acting and this, if there's interest in me in the future. So I hope that they're doing well. But I recently received a call from Stone Cold Steve Austin, actually, and he watches the Hannibal TV, which I was shocked at. You actually pointed out that he talked about my match with Al Snow on his podcast with Al Snow, and then we ended up having about an hour-long conversation, and I was shocked that most of that conversation was him wanting to know the details about various shoot interviews that I'd done. So that was really cool. But one of the questions Steve Austin asked me was why I wasn't in WWE. So that actually motivated me to contact Gerald Briscoe, who's a talent scout for WWE, and I wanted to double check why was my NXT tryout canceled in 2016 that he had set up. I wanted to get to the real reason, because that's what Austin wanted to know from me. So I figured, well, if Austin wanted to know, I should be entitled to know. So I asked, and apparently Briscoe said the reason that it was given was they already have my information on file and they don't need anything more. Well, the information they would have had on file, the last tryout I did with them, was the one I was signed from in 2009. But then, of course, I failed the medical test at the time. I've since been declared cured, and I've been cured for years now. But I guess by saying they already have information on me from 2009, they just see that medical issue as that's pretty much it. They're not going to give me another chance. So that's why I hope something more would come out of maybe an Impact chance for me. But if not, I'm fine with Great North Wrestling. I enjoy Great North Wrestling, and I enjoy acting. But I just thought it was cool that someone like Steve Austin thinks that I should have a chance in WWE. But at least out of that, I got some closure that, hey, there's absolutely no interest. They have their information on me. They're not interested. So I can close that door and focus my attention on more productive things.
That's unfortunate, man. Like I remember seeing a bunch of your matches and being like, man, this he's definitely got some great wrestling ability. He should at least get a look by WWE. And it's unfortunate the way things turned out, but at the end of it all, you mentioned Great North Wrestling is really growing at a really good pace, and you got guys like Steve Austin watching the YouTube channel and going out of their way to talk to you. So I think things are still going to look up. Obviously, you mentioned the acting is very good, and
I was recently in the commercial for the new Far Cry 5 video game, so that's going to be coming out in the coming months.
There you go.
So yeah, there's lots of good things, and the WWE that I watched when I was a kid that I was a fan of is not the same WWE as today. The WWE that I was a fan of, I'm working with the guys that were in it, both in interviews and in the ring. Haku, yes, I'm fighting him in the ring. Kevin Nash, I've wrestled. All these stars that I've been in the ring with over the years, the list goes on and on. The Al Snows, Psycho Sid Vicious's. I am realizing my wrestling dream, so everything's good, and I'd like to encourage any fans listening to this, definitely subscribe to the Hannibal TV on YouTube. Subscribe to this podcast as well, the audio download link, because we are posting old full career shoot interviews in audio format, and we do these audio updates, Great North Wrestling Podcast, like we're doing right now. And we also post the Impact Media calls, audio version. So greatnorthwrestling.podomatic.com. You could subscribe there. We're on iTunes. The links are all on our greatnorthwrestling.ca website. So check them out there. Cage Wars 2, May 12th. In Brockville, Ontario at the Brockville Memorial Centre. Tickets are on sale now at ticketweb.ca. Then May 25th, it's a Friday night, we are returning to the Pembroke Memorial Centre. We were there last year before over 1,000 fans. It was a great event, and more information on that Pembroke event will be coming in the coming months. Of course, I'm on Twitter at Devin Hannibal. I'm also on Facebook, Devin Hannibal Nicholson. Zach, what are you up to, and where can the listeners follow you?
Yeah, I'm as you mentioned at the start of the show, I'm doing quite a bit of things. I do some hockey announcing for the Central Canada Hockey League, and so you can check out some of that stuff there. I do some stuff for CKDJ. I'm the host of the Wrestling with Ideas radio show on CKDJ 107.9. This past week we did some interviews with Neil Pruitt, who was a former WCW producer, the voice of the NWO, and currently hosts the Secret
New World Order. Did you say that?
Yeah, there you go. So we got a great interview from him on that. It was interesting during that interview. He actually brought up Goldberg and his interaction with him, and how they actually had a backstage incident during Halloween Havoc. I want to say 98 maybe. And they were discussing how Goldberg didn't want to do a promo. And he said, we got to get this promo done. And it escalated to the point where Bischoff eventually had to say, you got to do this promo for Neil. So there's that sort of stuff in that interview. And plus, too, we
too bad Paul Orndorff wasn't there to teach him a lesson like he did.
Oh, I know, right? That would have been something. But also, and you know him too, Pat LaPrade, we've had on the show.
I don't actually know him. I've actually never met him. Definitely, he's disparaged me many times, but I've actually never had a conversation with him. We may have been in a room less than a handful of times together, but I actually don't know him personally whatsoever.
Oh, really?
And I actually, he wrote a column with completely false allegations about me, and I actually had to request that it be taken down because they were false allegations, and they did take them down. But I don't know what this guy's problem is. I really don't have any respect for him, and I don't like him. But he is definitely a historian, so I won't question that. But each historian comes up with history their own way. That's one of the reasons why I started the Hannibal TV, because WWE will present history their way. I'll present history, I'll present it my way. I try and be as neutral as possible. But of course, everyone has their own agendas, and definitely they have their own agendas as well. This other guy, I won't even mention his name, but he's definitely never spoken to me. He's never had a one-on-one conversation with me ever. For someone that has claimed to have known me personally, I don't know what his definition. Even you, Zach, we know each other, but I wouldn't say I'm personal friends with you, and I've had hundreds of times more interaction with you.
Yeah. But, no. But yeah, I mean, in that case, then, if you do want to hear some interesting tidbits on wrestling history in Montreal and in Quebec, you could definitely go take a listen to that interview as well. We talked about Maurice Mad Dog Vachon on the show. So yeah, that was pretty much this past week. You can tune in to Wrestling with Ideas every Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern on CKDJ 107.9. You can also listen online at ckdj.net. What else am I doing? You can follow me on Twitter at RiseGibby. I'll mainly just be tweeting a whole bunch of WWE stuff, New Japan Pro Wrestling, Ring of Honor, Impact, the whole 9 yards. And you can find me on there. Got the CCHL stuff in, Wrestling with Ideas. Yeah, I think that's it. And also you could listen back to some of the matches I've done commentary for Great North Wrestling as well.
On the Hannibal TV, and we hope to have you for some matches for our 2018 season. And just as you mentioned, Mad Dog Vachon, he's actually my favorite Canadian wrestler of all time. And if you search on YouTube, The Hannibal TV, Mad Dog Vachon, you will see probably about 10 interview clips that I've done with various wrestlers about Mad Dog Vachon. And there's a guy that is as legitimate as you can get, and he probably would have 100% been a MMA champion had MMA existed in the period where he was on top. So thanks a lot for joining us, Zach, and keep up all the good work. And fans, definitely remember, subscribe and check out our website, thehannibaltv.com, for all the information. Until next time, this is Hannibal.
That's all for this episode of the Great North Wrestling Podcast. Be sure to visit thehannibaltv.com for Great North Wrestling news, links, and live event information. Subscribe to the Hannibal TV on YouTube and subscribe to the GNW podcast at greatnorthwrestling.podomatic.com for instant downloads of our latest audio content.